Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in bodybuilding?
Yes. Should I do the long version or just like short?
You can do a long version.
Long version?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm from Michigan, born and raised. I started doing bodybuilding, I think in 10th grade. So I was about 16 years old. You know, I used to watch wrestling, wrestling as a kid, all the big guys in wrestling. I was like, man, those guys look jacked, it looks cool. So I started working out, me and my dad in our basement. There's downstairs in Michigan, there's Case Tornadoes, so we have basements. But we had a little weight set up, little, Joe Weider bench and a couple dumbbells. And so we would work out, and I was doing hockey at the time. So I would work out for hockey. That was the idea. Like, oh, let's just get in shape so you can get bigger and, you can take the hits and, whatever. So we would start working out in the basement, and then, gradually I started to enjoy the working out more than the hockey, and, I went decently far in hockey. Like I probably could have went further, but the bodybuilding took over. And after a few years, working out in the basement, I got a gym membership, and that was at the Powerhouse. And there was like a local bodybuilder there, and, he was like the big guy, everyone wanted to be, his name was Mark, and everyone wanted to be like Mark, like, oh, it's fucking big Mark. So it was a good spot to be. There were a lot of big guys in there. And so I would start working out in there and kind of seeing how they were training. I was working out with my dad in like the beginning, but then like, when you're 17, 18, it's not cool to work out with your dad. So, I went and started, working out with those guys. I wanted to be part of the big group, so I was doing that. And then I said, you know what, I want to do a competition. But of course, being from Michigan, you think, okay, I want to do a competition, but I'm not going to do a local one because who's going to see that, right? There's no one in Michigan does bodybuilding. It's not a really big thing. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go to California. I'm going to do my show out there, and then hopefully I'll be seen. So I did. And I did do a local show, like on a whim. I think it was like a 3-day notice. And, someone at the gym was like, hey, there's the show in Grand Rapids this weekend. You should do it. You're in shape. I wasn't in shape, but I thought I was. I was 16. No diet, no nothing, just working out. So I did that show. I was a teen. And I did all right. I don't think there was anyone that showed up. So I was like, okay, well, the next time I want to be ready. So I did a real prep, and I did this show. It was the 2004 World Gym Classic, and it was in San Diego, out here in California. So I convinced my parents to do like a vacation out in California, Disneyland, and we went to Mexico, which was funny because we went to Tijuana, and we didn't really know that wasn't a tourist spot, so that was interesting. But convinced them to go out there, and I placed first place in the teen overall. It was great. There wasn't a ton of competition, but I think it was like 4 to 5 teens. I was blowing them out of the water because I had been doing the training for so long. At this point, it was like I was a little ahead of the game because I was really studying, the supplements and just everything about bodybuilding. I was obsessed. No more hockey. I quit hockey. And it was just all about bodybuilding, all about moving to California, being a bodybuilder, so on and so forth. So I did that show. I got the first place, and I come back home to Michigan, and must have been maybe a month later, I had gotten an email from Ed Connors. Now, back in the day, there's no way to search these people, right? So we didn't have the internet. So we had the internet, but there was no Google, we had Yahoo or whatever. But you couldn't just put someone's name in and see who they were. So I was like, Ed Connors, who's this guy? What does he want? And it's weird because when you're from Michigan and you're from, an area like that, you always think anyone that's trying to help you is like a pervert or something. Like, oh, what's this guy want to see my muscles? Or, he's some old dude. Why would he want to help me? And my dad was kind of in my head about that. He's kind of like, okay, well, this old guy, you're not going to be sending pictures to this guy. We don't know him, whatever. Come to find out, Ed Connors is a huge deal, So I think I emailed him back, and I just said, hey, he was asking hey, do you need any money for supplements, for the gym? How can I help you? And I was like, I'm humble. So I was like, I got my parents' help, and I got a job, and, I'm pretty good. And he's like, well, can I send you some videos of people that I helped? So I said, yeah. So I shoot him my address, and he sent me a package, and it was all these VHSs, and it was Jay Cutler, Lee Priest, Tom Prince, all these bodybuilders that I was looking at in the magazines. And I was like, holy shit, this dude's helped almost everybody. This is crazy. So I remember he wrote a note in there, and then he was like, check out Jay Cutler's A Cut Above. So I was like, okay. So I opened up the VHS, and there was a check. And there was a check with my name, and it was $1,000. And I was like, oh shit, I made it. I was like, Dad, look at this check. And he's like, holy shit. And you think you're famous at that point. So I was like, hell yeah, this is awesome. I'm getting paid to do this. So I go back and I write, Ed Connors, and I say, hey man, I appreciate the help. I got the check, super thankful, grateful. So me and him, with the emails went back and forth, and he was like, hey, what do you think about moving out to California? I have a house in Palm Desert where, bodybuilders come. I guess he had a house in Venice, but then sold that. So everyone was kind of going to the Palm Desert, and I didn't really know much about California. I've heard of Venice, and Hollywood and Palm Springs, LA, whatever. So I was like, okay, yeah, Palm Desert sounds cool, What could be so bad? So I took him up on the offer and I moved out to California. And in my head, I was picturing, you know, like MTV spring break, girls and parties, you know, beaches, and wasn't like that. Palm Springs, Palm Desert is a gated community with old people, golf courses, and I'm sitting here living in a house. And the funny thing is that he thought that the other bodybuilders were staying at this house and that I would be able to, you know, learn from them and how to cook and how to eat and how to train. Well, they were never around. So I was just literally just me in this house with a pool, and it was all badass, but I was like by myself, you know. So, you know, party of one, going out by myself, and it was weird. It was like, you know, a little bit of homesick. And so long story short, that didn't work out. I ended up going back to Michigan, which was a huge mistake because, you know, I feel like once I got back to Michigan, I was like, shit, like I blew my opportunity. I got ready for the teen nationals. So then I was getting ready for the teen nationals. I was like, you know, I'd rather get ready in Michigan. At least I have friends out here. You know, I didn't really get to know anyone in Palm Desert, Palm Springs, because, you know, everyone that I met was like, this place sucks. Like, you know, I can't believe you're out here. You moved here. And I was like, dude, what? Like, I thought this was the dream. You know, I was very confused. So I go back to Michigan. I got ready for the teen nationals, which was in Pittsburgh. So this is 2005. And then in 2005, when I was getting ready for the teen nationals, it was like the first time I tried any kind of supplements, right? And I mean, again, you had no internet, really no YouTube, so I was buying these books. And I remember, you know, I purchased this book. It was called Building the Perfect Beast. And people that are watching this, if they're in that world, like, they know that book. And this book had like all these breakdowns of all these stacks that all these bodybuilders took. And, you know, you're looking at this one and be like, okay, and then, you know, then you got to get the stuff. And, you know, you're on all these bodybuilding forums, trusting people you've never met, sending money in the mail, all this shit. So, you know, that was the first time I had done that. I was almost 19 at the time. So I was about 19 years old, and I was getting ready for the teen nationals in Pittsburgh. Again, the whole family takes me out there. Another trip to Pittsburgh, another family trip. Now it was, you know, from San Diego to Pittsburgh, trying to convince them. And I ended up taking diuretics, which Ed Connors specifically told me not to take. But, you know, I was backstage, and all the other bodybuilders who, again, weren't super impressive, I felt like I could have won that show. And they were like, oh, dude, are you taking any diuretics? I was like, no, I'm just, you know, cutting my water through, you know, whatever we were taking. I think I was taking distilled water and like measuring it, or however we used to do it back in the day with, like, you know, dandelion root, you know, doing it the natural way. But I looked fine. I shouldn't have messed with it. So this guy's like, hey, man, he's like, you should try this Lasix. Okay, so I'm like, Lasix? Well, okay, I've never heard of that. He's like, yeah, you just shoot it intravenously, and, you know, you'll start to get rid of the fluid and you'll look real dry. So I said, fuck it, you have, oh my God, you're the greatest ever. You're going to give me this Lasix for free? Like, I barely know you, right? This guy's trying to help me. So I take the Lasix, and I remember that day I probably drank like a bottle, like, you know, a little, you know, 28, 30-ounce bottle of water, and I was sipping on it all day. Probably had almost all of it down. And the night that I took the Lasix, I was pissing like 6 bottles worth up every hour. And I was like, something's wrong. Something's not right. So morning of the show, I get up and I'm hitting, you know, some poses in the mirror, and everything's cramping. Like, oh shit. Okay, no big deal. You know, the show's only a couple hours away. Abs are cramping. So then I'm like, okay, this isn't good. I don't really want to tell anybody anything because I wasn't supposed to take the Lasix, and it's gonna ruin everything. So I'm sitting in the lobby, and, you know, I got my family around, and Ed Connors comes up. He's like, how you feeling, you know? And I'm looking at him, and he's like moving around in my head, and like everyone's trying to sound like robots, you know, they're like, I'm like, holy shit. So apparently, which I didn't know, is that the Lasix is not potassium sparing. So when you lose potassium in your body, you can die, which I wasn't aware of. And I think that's what was happening to me. So I went to stand up, and I eventually told Ed, I was like, look, I take this Lasix, and he's on the phone trying to call GNC to get potassium pills. There was a GNC across the street. It wasn't open yet. I'm taking bananas in, Pedialyte, and it was just too late. I ended up standing up, and my quad cramped, my ab was like protruding out of my body, and I was just like, and I just fell back. And I remember, you know, my parents were talking again, everyone just sounded like robots, right? And I was like, dang, I fucked up. So next thing you know, I'm on a stretcher, and I get shipped to the hospital. And I remember the whole hospital ride, I was like, hey, can you guys just get the potassium in the IV so I can get back there, you know, and do the show? And I remember the hospital was pretty close, and someone had, you know, come over there, and they're like, hey, I think it was Gary Udit's show. And he's like, you know, Gary, let us know that you can't compete today. And I was like, oh my God, dude, I just trained for a year to do this show, and I blew it. And so, you know, I spent the rest of the day in the hospital, you know, had IVs of potassium and sodium, and, electrolytes and whatever. And I ended up going back home. And when I got home, I was like, shit, like, I don't know if, this bodybuilding thing's for me. I was super disappointed Ed, disappointed my family. And I was just kind of like, all right, what do I do now? I can stay in Michigan and do construction or, work at a shop. And that's what I did. I started working for a truck company. And I was just kind of wrenching on the trucks, washing them or whatever, all these semis. And that winter went by and I was like, I got to get back out there. So I hit up Ed and I said, look, I know I screwed up. I was like, give me one more chance. I want to come out there. I was about to turn 20. And he's like, look, there's no room now, but when a room opens up, I'll let you know. So a room opened up and I drove from Michigan in my Grand Am GT. I loaded it up. I told my parents, I said, I'm out of here and this time I'm not coming back. And they're like, okay. So I drove, me and a buddy of mine, and we went back to Ed's house, the one I was at before in Palm Desert. And that time, I was going to try to do the USAs. And I got caught up in the lifestyle out here and I was training at Gold's Gym, and then I became a fitness manager. And then when I was the fitness manager, I thought I was making tons of money. I was like, holy shit, I never made this money before ever. This is crazy. And you don't really make a lot of money bodybuilding. So I was like, I'm going to stick to the gym thing. And I ended up not doing the USAs, and I ended up going into Temecula to manage a Gold's Gym out there. So that was really all the bodybuilding competitively. That was all I did as far as, 16 to 19, and then I almost competed at 20. But I was more interested in the gym business, and I was more interested in the personal training, and the competitive bodybuilding is fun, but I'm just too, I'm too extreme, obviously. If I'm into something, I'm going to do it. And it's like, I knew that if I was going to continue to do bodybuilding, eventually it would probably be, my life wouldn't be that long. You know what I mean? I might have been somebody, but I probably wouldn't be, here today or maybe past 40, So I was like, I'll do the gym thing. I can still be in the gym all day. I can be around what I like. And I don't have to diet, which is awesome because dieting sucks. So, when I had moved back the second time, I had moved in with two bodybuilders that were from Ohio and one was from Illinois. And the guy from Ohio happened to be Craig. And, me and Craig became great friends. The other guy, Joey, he did a little bit of bodybuilding stuff. He had like 3 covers that year. We'd go to, what was that bookstore? There was a bookstore, and we thought it was so cool because there's a place called The River in Palm Desert. It's like Palm Springs, Palm Desert, and it's like Yard House, and there's all these restaurants, and there's this waterfall. And there was a bookstore back in the day because those were things, right? So we go to the bookstore, and I remember we were going to Cheesecake Factory, and Joey's like, we're in the magazine section, and Joey's like, excuse me, ma'am, trying to talk to some hot girl. He's like, do you know who that is? And she's like, I'm sorry. And he'd be like, you know who this is right here? And she'd look, and she'd be like, oh my God. And we thought it was so cool because he had like 3 covers. It was like Joey, and then it was like Arnold and, Jessica Simpson. And we were like, holy shit, dude, like you totally made it. And, those days were cool. But I eventually, after living with Craig and Joey for a while, Craig went to Vegas, I came to Temecula, and I think Joey went to LA. So, that was our second run at that house. And, I still keep in touch with those guys. And, Ed Connors I still keep in touch with, but I think he just had like his 70th birthday. So yeah, that does that answer the question?
Yeah.
20 hours later, Jesus.